Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing all right.
It's kind of strange. I got an application source error at first, and the second time it went through.
I hung up on you. I I,
Oh,
I was dialing where I called, and I realized I didn't push record, and I was like, oh no, I don't like pushing record after I place the call. Somehow, I don't know. Somehow it doesn't seem like something. I just remember making thinking, oh, I always need to start recording and then place the call.
makes sense. I normally, as soon as I hear it ring, is when I start recording.
Yeah, yeah.
I was just double checking to make sure everything looked active. It doesn't look like the FaceTime audio is recording, which seems to be a recurring theme.
Mm, Everything looks good on my side.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about it. My local stuff's recording, and I sync it up pretty easily with the first few seconds of whatever we've got. So,
Yeah. Should we just jump in? Because I don't have any follow up.
yeah, sounds good. Means I have a very, very important question to start us off with.
Go for it.
So, when you are preparing toast, you are toasting the bread, right? But if you put it in a pan, are you pan toasting it or are you pan roasting it
It depends
or
on how
pan
much.
frying it?
I was just gonna say it depends on how much fat is in the pan. Because if you put enough fat in, it's frying, right?
I would think so. And I certainly use enough butter to consider it frying.
I think when there's a direct, so like a toaster uses convection to cook, and when you put it in a pan, it's heat conduction. So it would be roasting, right? But if you put something in the oven, it's roasted, and that's convection.
Well, it could be convection. It could also be just direct heat.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either.
You know, here's the so I'm so when because like I notice things like this all the time, and when I'm faced with a thing like this, I'm reminded of an episode of Nye the Science Guy about mammals. If you want, I can give you the season and the episode number, but I'd have to look at my notes. Anyway, when they're talking about mammals, the characteristics of mammals are that they have a constant body temperature, or they maintain a constant body temperature. They have hair, and they feed their young newborn babies with milk. But then you get to the naked mole rat, and the naked mole rat has variable body temperature, not like reptiles, but they're not. They have like a 10 degrees 10 degrees Celsius variation in body temperature, and their only hairs are their whiskers. Their bodies are naked. I don't remember if they feed their young milk. I assume they do, but I don't remember. But those two things sort of like put them like, okay, are they mammals or are they not mammals? And so Bill Nye would go into this thing. It was like, well, it's not the naked mole rat that has a problem. It's the scientist that's trying to classify everything. Yes, classifying things are good. Labels are good when used appropriately, but understand that not everything is going to be able to be classified. So I don't know. It's toast or roasted. I don't know.
Yeah, I just happened to be thinking about it. There are a couple of mornings this past week where I decided to do eggs over easy for breakfast over toast, and my preferred method of doing the toast is to lather butter on one side, put butter in the heated pan to put the bread on top of, and let it sit until the butter that is slathered on the top side has melted into the bread, and then flip it. So I just happened to be thinking about, well, am I roasting it technically, or am I pan frying it, or what? Because it's not toasted at that point, for sure, because it's not going into a toaster. Even though the end result is very similar, it's better because it's so full of butter, but that's a whole different topic. But it just struck me as odd that we still refer to it as toasted bread, even though it's not toasted at that point.
That sounds excellent. Like I want to have that breakfast.
So to round it out, we also get some spicy honey. So it's like pepper infused honey, And so after I pull the bread from the pan, I drizzle a little bit of that honey over one side and let it seep in, and then put the eggs on top. And it's a really good breakfast.
Oh, that sounds so good. And I have some real-time follow-up. That mammals episode with the naked mole rat is season 3, episode 13.
I might have to go look that up.
I'll see if I can find it for you. I have, so when I was in middle school, Bill Nye was on PBS, and I loved that show. And it was actually the music that got me interested in the show, because at the time, my upbringing was such that I was permitted to listen to a very narrow range of music, and since that show was one, not parodying, but like taking modern music and putting science themes and lyrics to it, I was interested in the music, and so that's where I started. That's why I started watching it. I think I was in 8th grade, and then I was like, "Oh, this is good stuff," and I really enjoyed the show. And so I had VHS cassette tapes of the show, like so many of them. One of my uncles that had an apartment that came furnished with cable TV would record, like, he would fill up cassette tapes for me and bring them over, and I'd have like a bunch of Bill Nye, because my family didn't have cable at this time in my life.
You know, it's funny that you basically bootlegged Bill Nye.
Yeah.
Like old school bootlegged Bill Nye.
Yeah. And so actually I have the VHS cassette tapes, and at some point in the past decade, I converted them to digital. And I would also maybe go to the library and find DVDs of Bill Nye, and also convert them to files on my computer, because DVD's already digital.
Nice. That was it for that particular micro topic, but it's been a burning question for a few days, and I knew there was no better place to ask than here.
I see what you did better. I see what you did there. Burning question. Fake. So, like, I've heard of fake news. I don't know what fake snow is. I know you sent me a link, but I haven't looked at. I've looked at some of the pictures, but I didn't read the article.
Yeah, this just flabbergasted me that apparently there's this thing going around where I assume it was people in Texas based on the weather over the past week or so, but somewhere that has been pelted heavily by the winter storms. Apparently, people were taking hard-packed balls of snow and using a flame to try to prove that there was a conspiracy theory that it was manufactured and not real snow, because they could light it and it would not drip or melt. It would just be basically burning snow. And the article explains that, yes, it's science, that it goes straight from its frozen form into vapor, and so you don't see dripping water as a result. But it caught me up completely off guard that there was someone who would think that snow was fake or manufactured in some fashion.
I mean, it is fake and manufactured in some fashion in places like Gatlinburg, where they want to allow people to ski.
Well, sure, you could certainly make the argument that ski resorts have the means to generate some amount of snow, right? But
right.
The idea that a
I know,
obvious natural phenomenon was dumping fake snow in order to do something nefarious, just completely out of left field for me. I did not expect to see that.
No, I didn't. I wouldn't either. And it's like, I'm pretty sure I've said it on this show. I know I've been saying it a lot lately, but this is another one of those cases where our education system is the greatest vulnerability in our national security in this country.
It's kind of interesting. There have been a couple of articles that I've read over the past couple of weeks as well, delving into, I'm going to call it the Fox News phenomenon because it's the way it was written. There was a journalist that did a piece. I'll see if I can find it and link it in the show notes. I know I've got a text with the link somewhere from Emily. But basically, it was not anything empirical. It wasn't like they were doing any type of scientific study. It was just, this is an observation I've had. Am I the only one? And there were plenty of people responding saying, no, you're not the only one, and giving examples. And there were some examples on the opposite side of the spectrum as well to help round it out. But it's reawakened a lot of reading lately on conspiracy theories and the way the news presents information to try to target our behavior and our psyche more so than providing actual factual news. Imagine that. And I don't know, just over the past week, it's been fascinating to read a lot of that backstory, and then seeing the snow thing on top of it. It was just like the icing on the cake.
Yeah, I think so. That term, that scientific, that scientific phenomena of something going from the solid state to the gas state, sublimation. The most often times you've heard of sublimation in reference to carbon dioxide. You take a bit of dry ice, they call it dry ice for a reason. It goes through a sublimation process where it goes from the solid to gas state. And, apparently snow does that too. The first time I've heard of that was a friend of mine. He and I were walking through Denver, and he was talking about, we walked by this spot where he once lost his keys in about 8 inches of snow. And he was telling me he was actually able to find them the next day. He says, sometimes when it snows here, it's so dry, it never melts. It just evaporates. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense because, the snow that dry and powdery is so small that the next day, the sun can beat down on it so hard that it never, you don't ever see the liquid form. The liquid never makes it to the ground. I thought that was really cool. And so that was the first time I'd heard of it. But then I can, that makes me think of a time when I can remember in a microscopy class that I took, we had to use liquid carbon dioxide. And I'm like, that's not a thing. And it turns out it is a thing. You can mess around with, the state of certain elements and chemicals or molecules and make them do things you need them to do. So I was thinking, how is that a thing? And it's like, well, apparently if you put carbon dioxide in a tube and pressurize it, it will go into a liquid state. So there's all these things that it's like, oh, I guess like we're taught certain things and it's like, hey, we're taught this thing and this is how it might normally occur, or you might normally expect to find this or whatever, but we don't talk about like, we can fuck around with a lot of things and do a lot of things that you're not expecting.
It's almost exactly what I was going to say. Is it's kind of amazing how science lets us do a lot of different things if we just pay attention to it, right? I mean, we've come far enough where we can manipulate most every element that we've encountered in some way, shape, or fashion or form. I mean, you think about the precious metals, gold, silver, etc. What have we not been able to do with them? And that doesn't seem all that strange because we think of it in its metallic form, and we think of it, heating it up to make it liquid or what, whatever state change we want. But we don't think about the simpler aspects of if you increase whatever atmospheric pressure is applied to an element, it has a different reaction as well. Or lower the temperature instead of raise the temperature. Those aren't the leaps that we immediately jump to. We have it in this state naturally, and we heat it up, and it does this thing. And for some reason, that's all we really pay attention to 90% of the time. At least as a lay person, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I remember one time standing behind the Genius Bar, and a woman or a man, somebody came up to the bar with their computer, with MacBook Pro, and those MacBook Pros are made of aluminum. They've been made of aluminum for a long time. Oh no, the MacBook Pro's always been aluminum. Sorry.
Yeah, the PowerBook was the titanium one.
Yes, and some of the PowerBooks were also plastic.
And some were aluminum.
Yeah, you had a plastic PowerBook. Then you had a brief period of time you had a titanium PowerBook, which was gorgeous, and then you had the aluminum PowerBook, which was also gorgeous. But I mean, anyway, so and then the MacBook Pro was always aluminum. There were plastic MacBooks. There were plastic iBooks. Oh wait, there's the plastic iBook. iBooks is an application. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just remember, I'm pretty sure it was a woman. She came to the Genius Bar and said that her MacBook Air was frozen. And in my head, I'm translating to John. It's not frozen, it's unresponsive. And then I got in my head, didn't say this out loud, but in my head, I'm like, oh, it actually is frozen. Aluminum is in its frozen state. Like all metal around us is frozen. And I remember it was just it dawned on me, that's all I was thinking about while I was trying to figure out what was wrong with their computer. I'm pretty confident it was a RAM issue. First, when people say it's unresponsive, that's stuff on the desktop, and RAM, going to look for page ins and page outs and so forth. But I wanted to.
It's a nice way to segue into the add-on bullet point that you put here.
Yeah. So the only reason I added this because I saw a friend of mine posted a tweet. I'm going to read to you. The tweet is from Dinesh D'Souza. I don't know who Dinesh D'Souza is, but he's tweety enough that he's got a check mark by his name. And it said, "What could Ted Cruz do if he were here in Texas? I'm hard pressed to say if he's in Cancun, that means he's not using up valuable resources of energy, food, and water that can now be used by someone else. This is probably the best thing he could do for the state right now."
Fair enough. I don't have any argument against that. I will say I found it rather striking that someone that prolific publicly would be so stupid. But then I remembered everyone around him has been horrifically stupid for 4+ years.
Well, longer than that. But I'm
giving the benefit of the doubt. There were at least some people who tried to be leaders prior to the previous administration.
I mean, the only one who stuck to his guns was Mitt Romney.
Yeah, I will segue back into that. Go ahead and finish the thought
Okay.
you were...
No, I mean, I enjoyed all the jokes about, Ted Cruz was a man who crossed the Mexican border to find a better life for his family, and things like that. Those I was amused by those, and but I that quote, I'm like, he's kind of right. He's one less, if you can leave the state, if you have the ability to leave the state, you might as well, because that's better for the people that are left. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't think the small percentage of people leaving the state doesn't really make much impact at that point. And him leaving the state, he really couldn't do anything there. Not that I'm trying to defend Ted Cruz, but the optics on that are so bad, just so bad. It's one of those things where he's getting maligned in the moment, and who's gonna care in 3 months when nothing has been done to address this? Or if nothing has been done to address this, is it even his place? He's elected to the federal level. He's representing Texas for the country. I'm gonna say that local representatives are the folks that need to be answering for this. And one other thing I wanted to point out was that I thought it was really good when somebody said, don't hate hard on Texas right now because there's a whole bunch of people without power and without water, and it's not their fault. It's the people who were elected. It's the folks that took advantage and didn't winterize their electrical infrastructure. Those are the folks that need to be held accountable for this. So that was all I was going to say.
Yeah, I certainly don't have anything to disagree with there. There are two things I want to mention, though. I came across a story of a guy that had bought, like a month or so ago, a Ford F-150 that apparently there's a model that has a built-in generator. And so he used his truck to provide some level of basic lighting and heat for his home, and then provided additional power for neighbors to like charge phones and do things to try to make it better, which I thought was a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that, you would think someone like Cruz might at least be able to provide that same level of impact. Obviously not, but, maybe he didn't know about it. Like I certainly, it would not be something that I would think to do. Unless I happened to have that vehicle.
Right.
But I thought that was at least an interesting side story to come out of it, is that there were some people who were trying to help others. But the more interesting thing, the part that I wanted to circle back to, over the past, I'd say 6 months or so, I have been more and more impressed with Romney than I was previously. And I never had anything specifically that I thought was unimpressive about him, other than I didn't know whether I really agreed with some of his policies. But I did like what he had been able to accomplish. And over, I'm just going to say 6 months, it's probably been a little bit longer, he and Liz Cheney have both risen up my list of people to respect for sticking to their beliefs and speaking out against just a lot of the bullshit, for lack of better wording, that we've seen in the federal political climate.
Yeah, I think about Mitt Romney when he was the governor of he was governor, or in his tenure as governor of Massachusetts, he made a public, he passed legislation for public health care for the state of Massachusetts, and that's very progressive legislation, relative. And I think he could have, I don't want to say easily, put a D next to his name and run as a Democrat, but a lot of his positions and his platform could be comparable to those of the candidates that run under the Democratic Party. So it's one of those things where it's like, I didn't vote for him because I like the other guy better, but I don't think he would have been a bad president. I think neither he nor John McCain would have been a bad president. Like I never had that. I still don't think George W. was great. But I mean, the bar has been set so low now that I'm just like, I would have gladly taken 8 more years of W over the 4 years of Trump that we had.
So it's funny, like looking back at my voting record, I did vote for W, and I voted for McCain and Romney. And then I voted for Clinton in the Trump-Clinton runoff. And then I voted for Biden with the most recent election. And it's interesting that what most of them share is the idea of making a better environment. Maybe not the best approach from their policy perspective, but all of them seemed to share that same idea of we can make things better. and had some level of action plan for how they thought that could be achieved. Where that comparison falls short is I think Obama had the same type of platform. For some reason, and I'd have to go back and kind of reevaluate how he ran, but for some reason I viewed his particular platform as a little bit too far off to one side than what I was comfortable with. And I would be curious if I could take my current self and reevaluate that platform, if I would feel the same way. Yeah, it's the classic hindsight 2020 type of idea.
Yeah.
I really think my current state, I would have voted for Obama instead. But how much of that is knowledge of how different policies turned out versus just a better understanding of political climates in general, because I've actually paid attention to it for a change.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That just sort of makes me excited for you to get to the 6th and 7th seasons of The West Wing, and so that we can talk about those.
Yeah, we're very slowly getting there. We have been delayed on getting the offspring to bed a bit recently, and so instead we've been just playing an episode or two of Scrubs and calling it a night, which is, of course, still a good endeavor, but we've got to get back on the West Wing train, because we were right around the end of season 4. I don't think we'd quite closed out season 4 yet.
Okay. So one of the things I've noticed, I just want to, before I forget this, I wanted to say someone that I noticed during, it was a speech that or something he said on the 6th of January. I don't remember if it was before or after the insurrection, but was Ben Sasse. He's a senator from Nebraska. He is articulate and funny, and he had good things to say. Like it was, his speech was of substance, and he was also, that made me notice him. And he definitely he voted against, or he voted guilty for the impeachment. But he was somebody that I noticed, and I've been sort of following. So.
And so let's add that as a quick little micro topic, because this has been bugging me for a little while. Mm-hmm. The impeachment was such a farce. There's no better condemnation of how fucked up it was than Mitch McConnell voting to acquit and then immediately afterward attempting to vocally rebuke Trump, than to be the perfect example of what is wrong with the Republican Party today. The entire reason he was acquitted, there were two very specific reasons, I think. One, party lines. I mean, the likelihood of a Republican voting to impeach a Republican is practically nil. This is the first time in history we've ever had such a quote-unquote bipartisan guilty verdict, and by that it's 7 Republican votes. I mean, come on. It's pretty damning in and of itself to look at the actual raw numbers. But to look at McConnell's statement and to say that he acquitted only because he didn't feel it was constitutional to impeach a non-office holding president is so beyond fucked up that I don't even have a way to rationalize it.
I mean, he gaslit he gaslit the Democratic member, or he gaslit any dissenting members of Congress, or any members of Congress that were aiming to vote guilty. He gaslit the country, and
well, I think the biggest thing on part of it is the they call them case managers, right? The Democratic representatives that were bringing the case before Congress. So. I think case manager is the official term. Either way, that will not be follow-up because I don't care enough to go figure out the official term. But the people who are bringing the information to light did a very good job of proving that historically there have been impeachment proceedings against people who are no longer in office. There is no reason from a constitutionality standpoint to think that you are suddenly not subject to impeachment proceedings just because you no longer hold office. The entire reason that conversation comes up is because Nixon resigned, and as part of that deal, the impeachment proceedings would not continue. That's not a legal standing. That is a specific instance where the agreement was made, if you resign, the impeachment proceedings will be dropped. How did we get from that to constitutional basis? And the plain and simple matter is we didn't. Like, if you were to argue this in front of the Supreme Court, I would be willing to bet limbs that the Supreme Court would uphold impeachment of a former president, as long as the proceedings started while the president was in term.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm no. Real-time follow-up. It was impeachment managers, not case managers. I did a quick look for. I did a quick look.
Close enough.
Yeah, no, totally. I wouldn't. I wasn't going to recall either of those. I'm no constitutional lawyer, but I mean that was a lot of bullshit. Like that wasn't applicable. I mean, here's the thing. After January 6th, I think articles of impeachment could have been written up on January 7th and delivered on January 8th. I mean, I think that was I don't think there would have been any problem with that timeline. The Speaker Pelosi, I think, was waiting to see if Pence would invoke the 25th Amendment, which I think should have happened. I think that there was a good reason to make that invocation.
I agree,
or a good case for the invocation of the 25th Amendment. So that didn't happen. So that delayed things a little bit, and I would have. It's easy for me to be over here on the sidelines and say what I would have done, but it's like, fuck. I had to give him 24 hours. He didn't do it on the 8th. On the 7th, we're drafting the articles of impeachment. We'll give him 24 hours to invoke the 25th Amendment. That doesn't happen. We're gonna take the next. I don't remember what the next step is. We're gonna take the next step and vote for impeachment, and then on the 9th, deliver the fucking letters of impeachment to the Senate. At some point during that time, McConnell said, "Don't deliver the letter. Don't deliver now because we're not gonna. We're gonna wait." It basically said we're gonna wait and do it when we come back in session. I mean, fuck all that. You bring the House or you bring the Senate back in session because we have business. This is serious business. Get him out ASAP, and they didn't do that. This is one of those cases where Democrats always lose so goddamn much.
Yeah, the correlation that I would bring. So maybe let's back up slightly. So impeachment is not necessarily a criminal proceeding, but it is triggered by criminal use of the office, right? So you can have impeachment proceedings, but you can also have criminal proceedings that pursue the actual crime itself. Mm-hmm. And that's separate. That's in the judicial system. Mm-hmm. But the correlation that I would bring is that you're basically setting precedent that, let's just say, I rob somebody and then I no longer hold public office. You're basically saying I'm no longer liable for robbing someone because I am no longer in that office. How does that even make sense? It's different if There is a difference. I don't want to. Obviously, I'm not a constitutional lawyer either, but that's not going to stop me from talking about it. The biggest thing I think here is that there is clear evidence to anyone of sound mind that what Trump did was incite a violent act against the democracy that we have founded the country upon, right? That is, by definition, treason, and absolutely an impeachable offense. If you don't want to pursue impeachment, you pursue the criminal prosecution of treason. And we haven't seen anything come out of that yet, but I hold out hope that maybe, just maybe, something will happen there. I doubt it, because for some reason or another, we put people in public office on a pedestal and require a further burden of proof than we require for other people to take that next step. But that's the key, fundamental difference that has to change. Just because you are a public figure and just because you are elected to office doesn't mean you get special treatment when you're talking about violation of law.
Well, apparently it actually does mean that. All evidence to the contrary, but I know what you mean.
That is the unfortunate reality, but I think that's where most of us need to wake up and ask for change.
Yes.
Or push for change. It's not even ask at this point. We have...
Demand it.
Correct. As a country, we have a call to arms or a call to action, however you want to phrase it, that we have to establish whether law is what actually dictates our interaction with society, or if privilege dictates our interaction with society. And if it's the former, it needs to be ubiquitous, regardless of what office you hold. And if it's the latter, I need to find a different country.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think it's going to be the latter. And I already know which countries are on my list. But that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah, I mean...
Not to derail it, overly bad. It's one of those things that has been mind-boggling. And, what better place to talk about it than the place that I have almost complete control over what's talked about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's crazy to think it's still dumbfounding. I kept saying that Mitch McConnell gaslit the country, and I feel like I never followed up with the fact that, he said, wait till we're back in session again. And then, the impeachment proceedings the impeachment trial proceeds. The defense only had to sort of maintain the status quo. Just, there's not there's no reasonable doubt. It's not a court case like that. It's a very different sort of proceeding or legal proceeding, but it felt like such a farce because his defense was pretty shitty.
Well, you kind of touched on it there. It's when we think about bringing sanctions against someone, we think about it in the scope of the criminal justice system because that's what we're taught. It's what we understand. An impeachment proceeding is not that. And it's difficult a lot of times to wrap your head around those differences. A criminal proceeding or even a civil proceeding for that matter, there is a expectation that when you walk into that courtroom as a defendant, you are innocent and the opposite side must prove guilt. Whether that happens or not, the actual logistics of that playing out may or may not be biased and influenced by a number of different things, and that creates a whole separate discussion about criminal justice overhaul. When you're talking about an impeachment proceeding, It is very much I'm voting with my party unless you can find something that absolutely condemns them in a way that I cannot vote with my party and maintain my electionable status.
Yes.
And that's a huge hurdle to overcome, which is why it should be noteworthy that this is the first time in history that many members of a political party have voted to indict or convict as well. It's ridiculous from a logical standpoint that all of us can see it. Let me rephrase. All rational people left in the United States at this point in time who are not embedded in conspiracy theories or who are so ridiculously pro-Trump they are completely and willingly ignorant of fact can see it. There is no imaginable arena as a rational or objective person that you can look at the way the presidency was leveraged to attempt to discredit the idea of mail-in votes and to attempt to proliferate different factually false claims, that the only way you could legitimately think that he was innocent is if you simply had these things to latch onto because a person of authority told you that it was accurate without doing any level of investigative work. That's the part that's infuriating, because we've seen, without a doubt, there are plenty of people who are more than willing to say, I don't care about reason, I don't care about fact, I don't care about science. I care about what a person in power told me. Obviously, they're in power and what they say must be true. And that is such an absolutely horseshit reason to believe something that it makes me so thoroughly disgusted that I have problems with it.
I know. It's like, I was just thinking, it's like the thing, it's like you have privilege and you have confirmation bias and you're utterly unwilling to recognize that. So,
and that's the nice way of putting it. I mean, that's what's so bad, right? It's like I realize that there is a level of privilege that I have because of my skin color and background. Mm-hmm. I know this from a theoretical standpoint. I know it from an understanding of the world around me. That doesn't mean that I really feel it in a way that translates into understanding it for other people. I know all of these things at a high level, right? I can understand it, I can see it, I can comprehend it. What irritates me to no end is that someone will still look at that and say, yeah, but. Well, no. there is no argument. Like, I do not have to look over my shoulder and hope that I'm not going to be the target of some physical assault or verbal attack for any reason. I can walk outside my door and walk through the neighborhood and dressed in all black and not be accosted by law enforcement because of my skin color. I get that. I understand that. And I understand that needs to change. That doesn't mean that I'm going to latch on to what some person in a position of quote-unquote authority says to make me feel better. I don't know. I feel like I'm on the verge of a rant and I need to stop it because it's going to completely change the rest of the notes.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, I thought that McConnell's speech after the voting was a great speech. And I was like, yeah, it should have, like, given that one, like, I don't know, like an hour earlier. Like,
yeah, it should have been what his speech was on the floor prior to the vote.
Yes, and the thing about it is, it was basically like even if he said, he's basically saying like I'm voting not guilty on a technicality, like a bullshit technicality, which I don't even think is actually true. So, yeah, I just felt like he gaslit the country for a few weeks after hearing that speech. Otherwise I thought it was like, that is the speech that we need from and the person to give it. It was just too little too late.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing that I took away from it is if Romney gave that speech, it would have been washed aside, right?
Yeah.
If Cheney had given that speech, it would have been washed aside.
Yep.
That's a problem.
Yes, it is.
I think that's the bigger thing that irritates me is that McConnell wields enough power to influence so many things. And he's obviously willing to go on record with a speech like that, but he's willing to do it when it doesn't cost him anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like every single one of the people who voted not to convict Trump on the second impeachment need to be voted out of office. I hold to that conviction 100%.
I agree. And the problem is, I don't think that, people are gonna, the people who
it's far more likely that the people who voted to convict are the ones voted out of office or will not be there next term.
Yes.
And that's the mind-boggling piece to me. Like out of all of these people, like I understand that Tuberville, like whatever the fuck he's doing, I don't even, that's a whole rabbit hole of bullshit that we could go down.
What a wanker.
God, I don't even know where to begin. So Tuberville excluded. Like if you pick the Tuberville of each state, right? They're the absolute dumbass, worst possible candidate that's going to stay in office because of reasons, and I don't even have a better way to say it than just reasons. So exclude those. The other people who represent areas that supposedly care and have an interest, they've got to be voted out. And I would be more surprised if that happens than if the Democrats lose control completely with the next election cycle.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fairly confident that's what's going to happen. So
that's enough depressing news, I think, for one episode.
I was just thinking, do you want to talk about established bouldering problems versus free climbing, or do you want to talk about the iPhone 12 form factor?
Yeah, so let's go into the bouldering problems first, because I had a chance to get out to Moss Rock both Saturday and Sunday. I didn't spend a lot of time out there. So Saturday I actually had a slip on one, and I pulled something in the bicep that I don't know exactly what it was, but Sunday was just kind of climbing around to make sure I kept it, loosened up and everything else. And it's fine now. But it just means that I didn't really tax myself Sunday. Saturday was more the attempt to climb some stuff. But it prompted a thought. Like, when we've gone out there, we've just kind of free climbed, right? There hasn't been any concern or care about what has been, quote unquote, established as a particular problem or a rating or anything else. Who gets to classify this shit to begin with? Like, to me, it's more fun to just climb around and have fun, right?
Right. So I think we should say, it's not, we haven't been free climbing, because like free climbing is like what you climb the face of something and you don't have any assistance, you just have a rope for safety. Versus what we've been doing has just been like bouldering. It's bouldering, and we're not taking any established routes. We're just doing whatever we want.
It's free climbing in the literal sense of just freely climbing around.
So but not free climbing. So, what I've come to understand from a guy I've been climbing with, who's been climbing all over the Southeast for the past couple of decades, is basically you get to if you climb it, if you're the first one, I guess the first one to send it, you get to name it and define it, classify it. And so, I don't know, however long ago when a lot of routes were established in the Southeast, maybe particularly Alabama, they would give it really low ratings. So what you might find as a V2 in Alabama might actually be like a V4 or V5 in Utah. And it was sort of what I've been told was it was done so to sort of discourage some people from climbing in Alabama, like other climbers.
Yeah, so what I was thinking of with this particular topic was more, why do we go out and look at established routes as, I need to climb this? Why don't we go out and just look at, I'm going to climb this particular rock and I'm going to climb it however I can actually climb it and have fun with it? Like, what is it that makes the established route something that people actually attempt and try to aspire to, instead of just freely approaching that particular rock and saying, I'm going to make it to the top and I'm going to see how I can?
I mean, I guess that's kind of, I think what some people do that. It's like your beta might be different than my beta because we have different shapes and different body types. So I don't know.
So the funny thing is I actually have the counter argument ready.
No, I haven't been climbing long enough, haven't been able to, attempt like beyond a certain classification. But I've been watching folks, like I've actually found that watching people has been a really good way of like developing my own techniques. But so far what I've seen is that, you might attempt, I guess, I don't know if it's an established, there's one thing I guess you could say, I feel like established route might be the wrong thing for bouldering, where we're talking about we're saying that this particular formation is a problem with this rating. Send it however you want. Do you want to know my beta? You do your own, I don't know.
Well, I'll clarify. So if you look at, and I'm going to reference the Mountain Project just because their app is relatively useful and easy to reference. But if you look at the particular place we've been going and look at what the established problems are, you at least get an idea of what they expect the route to take. And so you have something rated as a V0 or V1 or V7 or 8, I think, is also available there. And it gives you a line that is supposed to be the way that you ascend that particular problem. And what I've noticed by being out there is that there are a couple of climbs that I've done that are not listed anywhere because it seems to be kind of a conglomeration of multiple problems. But I find the way I ascend it is to start at point A, move to point B, move to point C, etc. Like it's kind of a mishmash, I guess, for lack of better phrasing, than to go straight from point A to point B being the ascension at the top of the rock. And it led me to think about, what am I actually going out there for? Am I going out there to solve a particular problem, or am I going out there to just climb and have fun? And obviously the latter is the answer for me, which may or may not actually change, which is my counter argument in a moment. That what does it mean to be an established problem en route? Like, why is it that if point A to B is the established problem, and that's the route that you're expected to take, but you can go point A to B to C, and C is the exact same finishing point as point B, isn't that just as successful? Like, what is it that makes us think that it's such a black and white thing when you're talking about a natural object where you're just wanting to get from the ground to the top of it? You know, where did that distinction come in is more the question that I'm asking.
I kept thinking of, like, stop trying to define me, man.
So I'll give you the counter argument if you want.
No, I do. But I was just thinking, I was like, I you know, because I'm a beginner, like, I kind of wholeheartedly agree. I was like, I'm just getting out there. Like, I'm out there for, you know, to try to start to practice my techniques. I'm trying to do something on the rocks. Like I'm out there, like, I want people to give me beta because I don't know what I'm doing. I feel pretty comfortable out there doing what I am doing, but I really appreciate going with people and getting, like, this, that, and the other. That's where I am. And yeah, I don't know. Like, why do you, I mean, I understand, like, I want to have an established route so, like, we can, like, compare notes or whatever, but I don't know. What's your counter argument?
So here's the counter, and this is the reason it made it to the show notes. While I was out there, I realized that I wasn't testing myself. Like, I can comfortably climb what I've been climbing and playing around with, and I'm not going to say it's easy. Like, there are certain aspects to it that are certainly quite challenging, but I'm not challenging my capabilities. And so when I came back home Sunday, I started looking up the quote-unquote established problems to see what that means. And I realized that the difference is to get from point A to point B on an established problem typically requires a level of technical understanding in order to accomplish that ascent. And so, like, the next time I go out, I want to actually attempt what the established problem is, not just climb around on the rock face. And I think it's a difference between I'm comfortable climbing around, I get it, I understand it, sure, I have fun with it, but now I want to challenge what I am capable of doing. And so I want to make the ascent that someone else has defined as the problem I need to solve. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to leverage certain techniques that I may or may not be comfortable with because I haven't had to do them in my previous exposures. And that was kind of the difference in my mind between an established problem and just going out and climbing on the rock. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I'm not even there yet, though.
I didn't realize it until I was out there Sunday. And I've had, enough time to kind of play around with it that it was like, I get that part of what I'm doing, like some of the different moves that I'm attempting are at least different. They're not just getting out there and climbing, so to speak. They're attempting to make a movement happen that may or may not be natural, in the way that I'm applying force. But it made me think that the next time I go out, I want to actually attempt to ascend a route that looks like it will make me use techniques that I have not used so far. And that was kind of the difference. And that's when I started thinking about this idea of why do we gravitate toward established routes versus just getting out there and climbing for the fun of it. And it's because the established routes tend to have these other techniques intertwined. And so it's a way to measure your progress or ability in a way that's not really quantifiable, but you can see the difference between I'm just going out there to climb and I make it to the top versus I'm going out there to climb this route and make it to the top.
That makes a lot of sense because, honestly, I have been, like, there was a problem that I was working on, and I remember the first time I attempted it, I couldn't finish it. I got about halfway through, and I was like, something about me physically will need to change. Like, I will need to be physically smaller, physically stronger before I can progress beyond this point in the problem. And then the next time I was at that problem, I was like, I'm going to do it again just to, practice, get going on it. And I got about 2/3 of the way through, and I was shocked that I got farther. I didn't think I could get past the point that I got to last time until something, I was drastically different. I'm not drastically different. I'm making progress, but I'm not drastically different. And so I was just like, oh, that was kind of huge for me, because I was like, okay, so just because I can't do it today doesn't mean that I won't be able to do it the next time I attempt it. Like, I'm working on making a certain physical shape progress, but that's not what's holding me back from climbing. Maybe sometimes it is, but I can't just think that that's what's holding me back. I need to keep practicing, because thinking that's what's holding me back is not always going to be the case when it seems like it might be the case.
Yeah, I also noticed there's a much more pronounced mental element than I originally gave credit for. So I know you're familiar with it. I don't know of a good way to describe it, but there's an area that we've been just kind of playing with, so to speak. And there's one particular section where what I was attempting to do is just, from a technical perspective, move from one side of the rock to another. And the reason it's challenging is because of a particular outcropping. And there's not really a grip on that outcropping. And I realized, with kind of playing with that technique and how to get from point A to point B, just thinking of it as moving from this side of the rock to that side of the rock, that a lot of it is just, am I prepared to fall? And if I'm not prepared to fall, there's no way I'm making it from point A to point B. If I am prepared to fall, and I actually have a pad in place in case I fall, I have no problems making it from point A to point B. And that was just kind of fun to notice as well. Like, there's, I don't know that would be overly pronounced if I weren't as old as I am at this point. But that's a huge factor in what I will attempt anymore. And it's because I am in my 40s and I can't take a fall the way I could, 20 years ago. So it's just been interesting to see that there is more to it than, can I hold on or can I ascend this particular side of the rock? Yeah. That's all I really had to say about that piece. It was just kind of a fascinating revelation.
I was just going to say, I'm really glad you had that counter argument ready.
Let's talk about the iPhone 12, because I almost put a note in saying this was the episode John wants to get kicked off the show. And then I decided, no, that's maybe a little harsh. I do like the fact that we have opposing views. It makes it fun. But tell me what you dislike about the iPhone 12 Pro.
So there's overall, I like the phone. I'm just not, I think I know why, and I'll save that for the end, but I'm not enjoying the form factor like I thought I would.
So before you explain, I'm going to interject that I absolutely love the form factor, and I cannot be more happy with the phone, which is why I made the joke about, this is where John wants to get kicked off the show.
Yeah. So prior to that, I had the iPhone 10, and I actually carried that for 2 years. And I went to an iPhone 11 briefly. I actually didn't like how much bigger the iPhone 11 was over the 10. And then I actually reverted and went to a 10s. I didn't want to go back to a 10. I want, at least go to the 10s. And I actually really like the XS, and I got my iPhone 12 after that, and it feels heavier, and it feels thicker, and I don't like that. I think that if it felt lighter and was thinner, I would like it so much more. But the difference, so like, let me just throw out the weight there, because I think that the it feeling heavier is more mental than anything else, because it's only 12 grams difference in weight. That's like 6 paper clips. Is it 6 paper clips or 24 paper clips? Whatever. It's not a lot of weight. It's I don't think that if I'm holding one, like if I was carrying it around for the day and then carried the other one around for the day, I don't think I'd actually notice it. Like, I don't think you can, like, I don't think it's perceivable. So I think it's more in my head than anything else. So but it just seems like it's heavier. I don't remember the XS being as heavy as the 12 Pro. It's to give you the actual numbers, it's the 12 Pro weighs 6.66 ounces, which is 189 grams, and the XS weighs 6.24 ounces or 177 grams. So I don't think that's like humanly perceivable, at least not in a practical way. When I hold them one in each hand, I don't really tell the difference. Like, I've got right now, I have my iPhone 12 Pro in my left hand and the XS in my right hand. I'm sorry if I looked away while saying. I can take a break and re-say.
No, it was clear enough.
So, it's funny. Honestly, it kind of feels like the XS is heavier as I'm holding them side by side. I don't know. Anyway, in practice, I just don't remember my XS feeling as heavy as the 12 Pro does. And the dimensions, the overall dimensions, I think are fairly similar. Just the iPhone.
They're definitely fairly comparable. You can look up the specific numbers. You
couldn't like really fit a pencil around, like, if you're drawing them, like if you're trying to like trace the footprint of the iPhone XS on top of the iPhone 12 Pro, you wouldn't be able to do that with a pencil easily. I don't know. That's a really weird way to say that.
No, I understand. So, Emily still has an 11 Pro, and then I have the 12 Pro. And occasionally, we'll hand phones back and forth to look at something. And I'm always reminded of the difference in feel between the two when that happens. And it's the 12 Pro definitely feels like it has more heft to it, even though it's really not that perceptible a difference when you get it to trying to kind of isolate it from like a blind feel test. Like, if you were to just hold your palms out and set the phones in your hands, you wouldn't notice that big a difference. But when you wrap your fingers around the phone, you do notice the difference, and you notice it very pronounced. And it's because of the difference between the flat edges of the 12 Pro versus the rounded edges of the previous phones. So I get that. Like, I even though the numbers don't convey that same story, there is a very different feel when you hold the two phones in your hands the way you would normally hold a phone. So I'll agree with you on that point, for sure. Hands down, across the board, yes. The 12 Pro feels more substantial in the hand because of the way it is made.
Yeah, so
that's what it makes it better, by the way. Just to interject.
No. So I love the way the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 4S were my favorite form factors. I mean, I really love the 3G and the 3GS too. I think it was really clever the way that so the 3G was my first phone, and I thought it was really clever the way that they put the thickness in a place where when you're holding it, you don't notice the thickness. And so it felt thinner than it actually was, or you have this illusion of thinness. But when the iPhone 4 came out, I was like, oh, this is like for so many reasons, the iPhone 4 was just like the first, like I feel like the first in a long line of like, this is what the iPhone should be. The camera was amazing. The display was unbelievable. And that's coming from a display like the like generation 1 iPhone was just like, oh, is this for real? This is a really good display. Like, I've never seen this before. And then going to the iPhone 4, which just sort of made it look like unusable. In so many ways, that was a great phone. So, like, you know, I was happy to see when they put flat edges on the iPad, because I knew it was going to come to the iPhone. And so I just am disappointed that I have these problems with it. And, you know, I looked at the dimensions of the iPad Pro, and it's just a little bit thinner. And I'm thinking that like that thinness might make a huge difference. Like it's 59 millimeters versus 5.9 versus 7.4. It's not a lot, but I feel like it will feel like more. I think it will feel like more than it is if they were able to make a phone that thin. So I'm just looking to see that they make it a little bit thinner and make it a little bit lighter, and maybe even have like an iPhone 13 Pro Mini. I think like that would be pretty cool too. I'd be torn. Like I wouldn't want to, like I couldn't, you know. Anyway, you know where I'm going with that.
I do. So let's tackle two of the pieces from a just pure tactile sense first. Obviously, even though we generally can't perceive the difference between, you know, a millimeter and 2 millimeters, it does make a difference in the way it feels in the hand. There's just no doubt about that. And do I think the current iteration of the iPhone, being the iPhone 12 Pro, talking specifically about the Pro models, obviously, do I think it could be a little bit thinner, a little bit lighter? Sure. Like there's no reason to think otherwise. And do I think it would feel better for it? Yeah, probably. The big difference, I think, is what you're expecting and wanting out of a phone as far as feeling goes. Do you expect it to feel stable, or do you expect it to feel like it conforms to the hand? Because I think the expectation there influences how you perceive something like the 12 Pro versus the 11 Pro, just to use the most recent two examples. The curved edges definitely fit better into the hand, and they definitely provide more of an illusion of thinness and conformity to the way that we grip something. That's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just to say that it's a different tactile feel than what you get with the 12 Pro, because with the flat edges, you notice it. It's not something that can be ignored with the way you grip a phone. The reason you would want the flat edges has more to do with gripability and the feeling that it is more secure, or that it is more stable in specific use cases. There are things that you can get with that, with the flat edges, that you cannot get with rounded edges, and vice versa. Like I don't think there's a way to make a device handheld that fits every use case with the same level of comfort that you would expect either of them to fit a specific desired use case. And that's really the bigger picture. The reason I love the flat edges and the flat sides and the heft is because it feels stable if I go to set it down and use it as a camera or a device to capture a moment, right? The rounded edges of the 11 Pro and the 10 series and, however many iterations of phones prior, I had to use additional accessories in order to use it in a way that I wanted to use it. The flat edges make a huge difference to me personally in usability that I could care less about how it feels in the hand for, 50, 60% of the use cases, as long as it feels stable and accessible for, that 10, 20% of what I really want to use it for. And we have very different use cases for the phone. How often are you setting the phone up over to the side to capture an event, or versus hand holding it in a way that makes rounded sides pretty much negligible? Or how often are you using it in a way that extra gripability of the flat edge makes a difference versus just holding it in your palm to, swipe through apps? Those types of things become more and more pronounced when you look at the form design or, flat edges versus rounded edges. I guarantee if it wasn't for the fact that I prioritize the feeling and usability of the, camera perspective of the phone over everything else, I would probably share your assessment. But I love the fact that it feels stable as a camera. That to me trumps everything. And so I'm willing to forgive any and all other shortcomings because I know I can use it as a camera in the way that I would expect to. And it feels good as a camera in the way that I would expect it to. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. It totally makes sense.
I think it does. It's so subjective that it's difficult to understand if I'm explaining it in a way that captures that idea, because it's the same kind of sense to me that if I pick up a Canon 5D versus a Canon T3, the 5D feels good. It feels solid. It feels stable. The other one feels like garbage because it just is. It's so much lighter and so much more ergonomical. I might be able to achieve similar outputs, but it doesn't feel as good in the hand from a camera perspective.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense, and you have a very specific use case for, or a very you have a specific primary use case for flat edges, and honestly, I think I wouldn't want to trade the flat edges, and even if it was like, I like the feel of the rounded edges better for most circumstances. I've never felt like the rounded edges of the 10, the 10, 10s and 11 Pro were such that I was gonna, I never felt like I needed more grippiness. I also think that I don't have the same grippiness desires as a lot of people do. However, I would never want to trade the flat edges because what you get with flat edges is more screen real estate for the size device that you have. And that to me trumps everything as far as form factor goes. You can put a bigger screen, they basically took almost the exact same footprint and put a decently larger screen. We went from, the 5.8 inches to 6.1. That's pretty good. That's a pretty sizable jump. So, yeah, I would never argue for different or to go back to the rounded edges because like the larger screen is just too good, or it's too much of a trade off. It's
interesting because I didn't actually think about the screen size. You know, my focus was so much on my physical use case that I didn't even think about the fact that there would be a screen size trade off.
I mean, that's how they. I mean, that's how they got. You know, they went up 0.3 of an inch for basically the same footprint. But and then the number of times that I want a flat edge for the use case that you've described is not a lot, but it's great when it's there. Like it's great to be able to when I want to, even though it's not a lot. So again, it's not the flat edges. And then, it got me thinking about like, well, what about the iPhone 5? The iPhone 5 felt really good. I remember actually feeling like this might be a little bit too light. So I quickly pulled up the specs on the iPhone 5. It's thicker. It's 7.6 millimeters. I don't know that.
But it was aluminum.
It was aluminum, yeah, and it was a lot lighter. It was 112 grams instead of the 189 grams. And so at the end of the day,
I think what we've discovered is that the weight is more your complaint than anything else.
I think my complaint more than anything else is that I'm using the phone more during the day because I'm at home and I can. It's not sitting on my desk as often because I have now would say I have a variable work schedule where like I do my independent work when it suits me best, not necessarily between 8:30 and 5:30. I might be picking up my phone more, and I think that's actually what the problem is.
It's interesting because I have always been a very heavy phone user ever since the first iPhone. Let me retract that. Probably not since the first one. Ever since the iPhone and the App Store were a thing, I have been a very heavy mobile user. Like my general level of usage of the device has been pretty consistent as a trend over the years since third-party apps were available. And by that, I mean it has gotten more and more usage over time, as you would expect, but it's not a drastically different change year to year, right? And so being a heavy mobile user, it feels like it's kind of at that sweet spot where if it were lighter, I would appreciate it, but I don't want it to be lighter and sacrifice what I currently get. So I think the trade-off for me is the functionality is there and it's great. I would actually appreciate greater functionality from the standpoint of better battery management, better battery life, but it's not at a point that I consider it a negative. It's just right now it's good enough. If it can be better and it's still heavier, all right, I will take that trade-off. But if it can be better and lighter, that would be the perfect embodiment of the two worlds kind of coming together. And I think that might be the better way to summarize it, is that under heavy use, the phone is a little bit on the heavy side. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's noticeable. And if you can make it a little bit lighter, but still get the same level of heavy use, it would be a game changer. Is that maybe an accurate way to describe, in summary, kind of what you were thinking?
That's exactly what I want. I was thinking about in 2007, when the iPhone was announced, I was like, oh, I want that. And the reason I wanted it was like, I want to have one thing in my pocket instead of the two things I have in my pocket. At that point in time, I had a Motorola Sliver and I had an iPod video. I think it was the bigger one with 60 gigs, 80 gigs, whatever. And I was just like, I want the iPhone because now I have one thing in my pocket. I have my phone. I have my iPod. That's awesome. And I can check my email. Whoa. You know, I thought that was so cool. And I mean, I was ready to go. And I got to say, I want to interject. I also remember in late 2007 standing in line for the launch of Leopard, and dude behind me had an iPhone, and I was like, so it's like I think it was the first time I'd seen someone out using one. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So anyway, yeah, I mean, when it solved the problem of like not having two devices in my pocket instead of one, I was hooked. Now, I mean, the use case is like well beyond that. And until we can get the tech that's in Westworld that they have for their phones and tablets, yeah, I'd like, more power and lighter. But, the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 5 and 5S told us you can be a little bit too light. So and the iPhone 6 and 6S they taught us that you can actually be too thin. So I want it to be as light as possible without being too light, and as thin as possible without being too thin. And then, and there we go.
And those are so subjective.
No. They just need to come talk to me. They just need to hand me something and be like, "Is this okay, John?" I'm like, "Yes, it's okay." No, it's not okay.
Yeah, I laugh about it because it's, the 12 Pro is pretty close to kind of the perfect feel for me personally. I like having that little bit of heft to make it feel like a premium product, even though I know there is nothing about weight and premiumness that actually correlates. It's just for some reason or another we make that mental connection.
I disagree.
No, I will argue that one. Like the reason we do it is because if it weighs more, it must contain more. Like that's the just bare primal instinct that yes, this is better built or more robust than the alternative.
I think that is true, but I think we've also been conditioned for that because there are products that are made of cheap materials. And when I say cheap, I don't mean it in the colloquial way of less expensive. I mean cheap as in low quality. And there are, it's not to say that better, higher quality materials weigh more, titanium being the example of that not being true. But a camera body that is, I'm assuming, some metal that gives it its strength and rigidity, like a DSLR camera body with a plastic exterior, it's heavy. That makes it, the metal inside makes it heavier, but it feels like a higher quality. And I don't know that it's necessarily the heaviness of it, but like the fact that you can't flex it as opposed to something that is just plastic and feels a little bit too flexible, like you could break it. That's where I'm coming from.
All right, so on that point, I would agree. Typically, there's magnesium and some other alloy blend that is used for camera bodies that is more weather resistant and more rigid than just plastic. And part of this also comes into play when you're talking about DSLR versus mirrorless versus point and shoot, where part of the resistance to mirrorless cameras was the fact that they felt so much lighter and so much easier to break, even though in use they probably were not at the time. And
yeah, they didn't have a mirror inside of them.
Yeah. And so over time, the trend has been to recognize that just because it's lighter doesn't mean that it's less well built. There are other things that you can look at to understand that. But we do equate a number of things with weight. And part of that is related to its resistance to being bent in a way that we don't expect. Part of it is just that we know, if you think of like a glass lens, or, think about a pair of glasses. A pair of glasses with a metal frame and glass lenses feels better than a plastic frame with polycarbonate lenses. They might achieve the same purpose, but the heft, however minute in comparison it is, for the metal frame and glass lenses just feels better in a way that we can understand from a tactile sense, but we have no way to really translate that into why. And that same thing is applicable across the board when we think about devices and, pretty much everything we encounter, right? You pick up a piece of furniture that weighs 10 pounds and you think, oh, it's a piece of junk. You pick up the equivalent piece of furniture that's made out of solid wood that weighs 50 pounds and you think, well, number one, I'm going to throw my back out. Number two, this feels, pretty solid. Right. There is a certain amount of stability and luxury conveyed in weight that's very difficult to remove when you think about a product. And so you think about the weight of like the 12 Pro versus the 12, and I say this with the caveat of I've never held a 12, so I don't truly know how they compare, but the stainless steel heft versus the exact same design with the aluminum heft, to me, should feel similar if you think about the way you grip it, but I guarantee you the stainless steel model feels larger and bulkier and more premium because of the way we have been conditioned to think about weight.
Yeah. It's kind of tricky. I think the furniture example you gave was really good, because just because it's heavy doesn't mean it's good. Like, yeah, you have an inch thick piece of oak heartwood that's not rotting. That's always going to be stronger than the same thickness particle board. Always.
But you could turn around and get a piece of mango board that's going to weigh half the oak, and it's still going to be just as high quality.
Right. Well, and a lot of that, like I said, I think the furniture example is a great example, because like if you have like a solid oak piece of furniture that's not well constructed, not well built, just generally like flawed in how it has been assembled, or like the assembly design, it's not going to be a strong piece of furniture. It's going to have strong pieces of wood in the furniture, but it's not going to be a strong product. Whereas you could be very clever with the construction of the exact same type of furniture with much lighter materials, and it be a much more solid piece of furniture based on how it's engineered. So I think that's a good example. But
pine is a good example, because pine is notoriously horrible wood.
Yes.
But when put together appropriately, it can certainly be more stable and solid than oak. It depends on the craftsmanship of the piece.
Yes, 100%. So I think that's I think that, to your point, that's where the psychology of heavier equals better. And and I was also thinking about like back in the day when like folks would say like those big cars from the 70s made of steel were safer. No, they were like way more dangerous. All things being considered, like take away airbags, a car made out of aluminum with a rigid frame with appropriate crumple zones is always going to be safer than a big steel box. So it's not, weight isn't, to further your point, that weight is not always premium.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, so it's kind of interesting. Just over a year ago now, we had the BMW totaled.
I saw that post.
And just thinking about that particular scenario, like if it had not been designed in a way to absorb impact and crumple around a person, that would have been so much more serious than what ended up being the case. That it's a good reminder that just because something is designed to be destroyed in a pre-understood or predetermined fashion doesn't make it less from a quality perspective. It just means that it was designed with, if this happens, this is the result, and this is the predictable result. Whereas you go back to, the older steel vehicles, there is no predictable result. It is either it crumples or it doesn't. And either way, there's going to be some significant level of force exerted upon those people inside, and they're going to be thrown in some direction, and we just have no way to predict it.
Uh-oh. Are you there?
And apparently I lost you.
That was weird.
Yeah, I think there may be something with like reassociation to access points going on internally.
Uh-oh.
Well, it just seems kind of strange that I tend to experience this particular issue. And the only explanation I have is that I did change my interior network setup a little bit a couple of weeks ago. Basically what I did, I have 2 in-wall access points and 2 circular access points, for lack of better phrasing, even though they're 2 different types. I relocated one of the in-walls to try to point more directionally toward a section of the house that was less well-served. And I'm wondering if I'm not having an issue where at some point the computer renegotiates a connection to one of the 2 access points, that they may be too close.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to look at it closer, but it just seems really strange that I tend to be the one experiencing this problem. Because if I turn off Wi-Fi and turn it back on, everything works again. And that's too consistent of a scenario for me to ignore.
Yeah. See, I have my router. I hate that I have to do this, but I have my router on one end of the house, which means that like I'm broadcasting, half of what I'm broadcasting is like hitting an insulated wall and, going out to the neighbors. And along the length of my house, I have one mesh point. So I'm always I'm on the opposite side of my house of my router. It's probably the mesh point isn't exactly necessary, but I've noticed that it helps, and because of the rooms that come off the hallway. So I stuck the mesh point in the hallway, and it has made, I won't say all the difference, but it has made a noticeable difference. It's been there for a while. It definitely helps with the the garage. It's right over the garage, so it actually definitely helps with Wi-Fi connectivity in the garage and actually in my driveway. So,
what I was attempting to address is if you come in the front door, there's a little table there in the foyer that Emily has turned into her office while we're working from home.
Oh no! Wow. Okay.
And she was encountering some issues with connectivity dropping. And so I made some changes to account for that. And I think I have 2 access points that are just too close, where there's some negotiation issue because of where I'm recording in relation to those access points in general.
That makes sense.
Because I don't experience this issue anywhere else for anything else. But I also don't have a use case where I have constant, streaming, like a session active that I'm relying on that consistently for any other use case, where I wouldn't notice a little bit of a blip while access to a different access point is negotiated or reconfigured. I don't know. It's something I'm going to play with because I know, like, as I sit here now, I have 2 access points that I can physically see. One of them is circular in nature, so the way it broadcasts is, of course, in a band outside of it. And the other is an in-wall that I have predominantly for the built-in switch functionality, but I have it laying on its side because I don't care about the wireless piece of it. I care about how it expands the rest of the network. And so the broadcast for the wireless piece is more if it catches anything toward the kitchen, great. Otherwise, I don't care. But I think there's a little bit of overlap here where I sit as we record, and I think that's what's causing me the problem for the occasional random disconnect.
I don't remember what we were talking about, and I think that you should put a big record scratch sound to transition us between the two, and no explanation except for maybe this that I'm saying right now.
Well, I think it's just going to be fun to listen to the transition and conversation without any explanation.
I really don't remember what it was we were talking about. It couldn't have been that important.
We were talking about the 12 Pro and heft and everything else, but honestly, I think we said everything there was to say about it.
Yeah. To sum it up, it's a little bit too heavy.
Or from my perspective, it's just right.
That's fair. I guess that's it for today.
I think so.
Yeah.
That certainly rounds out the topics that we have for the show. Let's take like a 2-minute quick break and then go into after show.
Okay.
All right. I'll be right back.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at untitled_hosts. Send us an email at untitled.hosts@gmail.com or follow the feed directly at the untitledpodcast.com. You can also find all sorts of ways to contact Jesse at jthart.com. Thank you for listening. That's a wrap. All right. Sorry. So this is the second time in a month that I have dealt with Jacob getting slightly congested, and then 2 days later I get slightly congested and have to deal with the ramifications thereof of a head cold. And so I had to go, blow nose and generally speaking, have fun. But it just, God, I really wish this phase would end.
It will.
I know it will. It's just one of those things that it's just so annoying that every time he gets some level of head cold, I can pretty much count on 2 days later I'm going to feel similar symptoms for a couple of days. So what's this about HomeKit?
I bought some lights, some smart lights for my house, and they were cheap. They were low cost. They aren't actually cheap. They're actually really nice. They are maybe technologically not robust, but they were inexpensive. And I now really, really like them. And tomorrow is the last day that I can return them. And the only reason I'm thinking of returning them is because in my house I have two. So let me throw out the terminology because I had to learn it. You've got a standard light switch is a single pole, single gang light switch. So you've got one toggle that turns the lights on and off. If you've got two toggles that control the same light, you have a three-way light. And if you have multiple lights in this in the same panel, like two lights that control like right next to each other that control two different lights or two different, circuits. It's a two gang light switch. And so in my house, I've got two gang light switches that I'd like to replace and two 3-gang light switches that I'd like to replace. And I want them to all be the same. What I bought turns out only makes single gang light switches. They make a single pole, they make a dimmer, and they make a 3-way. And I need so if I were to not return these, then I would have to get a different brand or not use them, and if I wanted them to all be the same brand. So if I'm in the process of getting all the same light, then let me see if I can get a HomeKit one, because I'm interested in home I'm interested in using maybe Siri for home automation. I think I might have more options than the lights that I have. Right now, I can control the lights from the app, and I can control the lights from Alexa. I only have an Alexa because it came with my thermostat.
I like the distinction. So let's back up slightly. My experience with home automation started with a product called Indigo that was basically a application that ran on a Mac that acted as a server that communicated with Insteon devices. And eventually they expanded that to include Z-Wave devices. And then I transitioned from all of those to HomeKit devices. So I've got, some level of experience with different brands and different methodologies. All that to say, what I would consider first is what control mechanism you want to use, and that should influence what you choose. What I have found over my use cases is that I prefer to control lights at the light level, not at the switch level, even though previously with like the Insteon devices, I was doing a mixture of controlling at the light level and switch level and outlet level, depending on what device I was using, right? With HomeKit, though, I find it to be more reliable if I control it at the final endpoint level. And so what I have settled on for lighting is either a bulb that is HomeKit compatible for whatever specific fixture that I have it in, or a HomeKit compatible switch that I plug a lamp into so that it's still at the endpoint, right? The lamp is always turned on. It's just that the switch either is on or off and it's plugged into an outlet. The reason I prefer that is because it's easier to predict behavior and know that it's going to operate the way I want it to than to move that upstream a little bit into the outlet or the switch. Because like in the living room, for example, we've got two different switches for the lights on the ceiling fan and one switch for the fan itself. It's easier for me to leave power from a switch level going to the fan and the HomeKit or home automation level being the bulbs themselves, so that I could completely ignore the switches and drive everything around scenes or specific toggling of the individual bulbs. And I find it to be reliable and consistent versus what happens if someone accidentally flips a switch. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
So the big question is more a matter of how you intend to control it, and then try to create the environment around how you intend to control it.
I like it at this. I like the switch level. A lot of the way the control that I'm looking to add is through Siri shortcut or just shortcuts. I guess I feel like the better alternative to Siri is NFC tags, but I don't think I'm going to go down that road. If Siri is just reliable enough, and I found that Alexa is not really more reliable than Siri, at least for turning lights on and off. I may just go, look for using Siri to run a shortcut. I think that would eliminate certain Siri issues.
So I have a lot to say there. So in the office, because I have the HomePods, I leverage Siri for running my shortcuts for the lighting scenes in that particular room. I do not use anything other than like scheduled automations and the Philips Hue dimmer switches in the other rooms that I leverage scenes. I don't know that I would feel confident in Siri for my day-to-day usage, except for the office. That said, I think if I were leveraging a HomePod in a couple of different rooms and using those same automations, it would be perfectly fine. And I think why I have a lot of hesitation there, the only time, and I mean, I cannot stress this enough, the only time I am not frustrated by Siri is when I am activating scenes for lighting in the office. There is no other use case on this planet thus far where I have not been frustrated by Siri in some way, shape, fashion, or form in my day-to-day use. And so using Siri as the interaction mechanism, that alone may or may not make it what you want it to be.
I can only think of a couple of scenarios where I want to use Siri, and it would be Siri turn on all the lights, Siri turn off all the lights, something like that. Very minimal. Like the brand that I have right now that I'm thinking of returning is Casa Smart, and again, it was fairly inexpensive. I actually had to return one because it looks like it was an open box that was sent back to me. But Casa Smart is made by TP-Link, and I like them because they don't require a bridge. Like you plug it in, and you basically look for the device's MAC addresses right there in front of you, and you connect to a it's like, I guess it's like a it feels like bridge mode, like when you put a router in bridge mode, and anybody can connect to the device. It's doing that. You connect to it, and then you use your phone as a way to get it onto your actual home network. Does that make sense?
It sounds a lot like the way the iDevices switches work, which I have 4 of those. And basically, in the iDevices app, I would find the particular switch that I plugged in based on its address and add it to my home definition. And at that point, it was translated from the iDevices app into HomeKit, or the home app. All of it was HomeKit anyway. So I leverage a combination of the iDevices switches for a handful of lamps where I want the lamp to turn on, or I have one outdoor switch that I also use for Christmas lights or seasonal lights in general because it's easier to automate. And then I have Hue lights for the rest of my use cases. And the Hue lights, of course, require a bridge and are a little more finicky on whether they're going to activate or not. But the benefit to using the hue lights is I have a couple of motion sensors and a couple of dimmer switches that can act as triggers for lighting scenes in general, which I like that flexibility. But the iDevices switches sound like the same concept as what you've got, which is basically the standalone piece. You plug it into an outlet, or maybe with the ones you've got, because of the way you described it, you replace a switch with it. But either way, it acts as a relay, and it's either on or off. And that's kind of the entire range of functionality that you have. It's just a matter of how you tie that into HomeKit automations.
You know, I'm actually, like, HomeKit automations aren't that. I don't need them that much because, like again, if these Casa Smarts were made, you know, if they made a 2-gang and a 3-gang option, this would not be something I'm thinking about. Because the app itself is actually pretty good. You can set individual schedules for each light, and you can set timers for lights, and I think that would be great. Like, I would definitely set a schedule for my outdoor light, and my outdoor light would be on all night long, and then I would it would turn off in the morning, and I think that would be so, like, I would like that so much. And it's just that honestly, even if those were on a single gang in a single gang location, that would actually work for me, because I don't have to have them all switched over to be smart switches. If I could just get those, or the lights that control, the switches that control the outdoor lights are on, both are on either a double or triple gang wall mount, and so I can't really use those. And I just don't want to have two sets of lights.
So maybe the better question is, with what you have, what are you missing from an end result perspective?
The only thing I'm missing from an end result perspective is light switches on a like multi-gang light switches. That's all I'm actually missing. That's the only reason I'm considering returning these. Because they don't make them they don't make this particular brand on multi-gang light switches, and I don't want to have two brands, meaning two apps to.
Yeah. So I would challenge that slightly, because you could have two different apps for initial setup, but if it's all HomeKit, you can end up controlling it all from one place.
Yeah. Except for the ones that the Casa Smart are not HomeKit enabled. That's the thing.
Okay. Now it makes more sense.
Yeah. So I wasn't clear about that. Now that I'm thinking of returning these, is it worth paying more money for something that's definitely HomeKit enabled? Really, the only thing I'm trying to solve is multi-gang. Like, I need to find something that's multi-gang.
So I will say that I made the decision to go all HomeKit because I liked the fact that I could customize everything in one place. And by that, I mean, I've got light bulbs, I have smart switches, I have a thermostat, I have other devices that all communicate with HomeKit. And to me, the simplicity of being able to go into the Home app and manage all of those things means that I will not add another smart device that is not HomeKit compatible. But that doesn't mean that it's the only way to do it. It's all a matter of whether you want to run something server side locally. You know, since you do have that compute power to be able to do so, you could run something like Indigo and control it all outside of HomeKit. The only reason I changed from that to HomeKit is because at the time that I was looking for a solution for thermostats, I didn't want to pay the price of what I would have to pay for a replacement within the Insteon ecosystem for what I have here. and I elected to choose a HomeKit capable, thermostat, and led to deciding to phase out everything that required a server running on-prem. Now it's really not a concern. I could easily go back to running something on-prem and could care less because I have more than one device that I could set it up on. But I do think there is a lot of value in not requiring a server to be running on-prem. And so I would recommend going the HomeKit route from that perspective either way. Because while it may not be an issue now, in 3 or 4 years, you might look at it and decide, whatever device you have it running on is failing and you don't really want to replace it. You don't really want it to run on, whatever other computer is available. There's a lot of flexibility if you pick a particular framework. And in my case, I chose HomeKit because of the investment within Apple in general. There's a lot of value in picking one of those frameworks to be all in on and build around that instead of piecemealing it. That said, I think most of why I like HomeKit is because there's an emphasis on devices won't connect without a specific level of authentication and security surrounding them.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to find any other solution that I felt that confident with, unless you are running your own server internally and defining these particular endpoints manually the way I was doing previously. And HomeKit is unmatched in that regard. So if you're going to pick one, it would either be run a server locally or go HomeKit. And if you aren't wanting to set up the local server, I just can't see a reason to not go HomeKit.
That is kind of, that's what I was thinking. Like, for all of the reasons you enumerated, that's why I was thinking of like finding one that is HomeKit compatible. And so far, the conclusion that I'm coming to is like the Cassetta by Lutron is probably the way to go. But there are a few things I don't like about it. One, it looks like you've got to have a bridge. I'm not a fan of that, but...
So I will say, like, from the bridge perspective, the Philips Hue line does require a bridge. I have one bridge, and I have, something like a dozen lights, I guess, at this point. Plus the ancillary, I have 3 motion sensors and 3, wireless switches. As long as you are only required to have the one bridge translated to the devices, I wouldn't let the bridge be a deal breaker from that perspective. Now, if you have to pay $200-$300 for a bridge plus whatever you are implementing, that's a little bit different story. The fact that you can get a kit from Philips that has a bridge and 3 lights for, I don't know, $100, and then you can get replacement bulbs or additional bulbs for ranging from $20 to $100 to $500, I'm sure, depending on what type of light you want. Yes, it can be expensive, but you can also get inexpensive ways to automate lights depending on what you want. Like, if you don't want color, if all you care about is a light and a certain level of brightness, I mean, the hue, I think they just call it hue white. I don't know. I have long since lost track of their marketing jargon. But Philips makes a line of bulbs that are just white that you can control the brightness, and then they make a line of bulbs that are, color, where you can control brightness and color. As long as all you want is a white light and all you're doing is controlling brightness / temperature, those are cheap as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't mind the cost of a bridge plus those lights because it opens up a world of if I choose to add color in this room, or if I choose to add motion sensors at 20, $30 a pop for these different places. Like one of the neat things that I've done is in the master bath, if you have to go to the bathroom after sundown, the motion sensor will trigger the lights and they'll be red instead of, blinding bright white. And so, you go to piss and you're not blinded. You are more or less eased into a scenario where you can turn around and go back to bed and not be just jarred awake. Like it's funny, and I certainly will laugh about it because it is a ridiculous thing to do. But it makes life so much better in general that, I don't mind paying for a bridge up front to be able to have that functionality down the road. And like in the living room, I have accent lights, both with a light strip and with just a standalone lamp that, sure, I can sync those with all sorts of different things. But I have a motion toggle, or not a motion toggle, the dimmer switch on the wall acting as just a wireless remote switch so that you can press it and it'll turn on the accent lights. You press it again, it'll turn on the accent lights plus the bulbs in the overhead light. You press it again and it kind of moves to just the brightest setting, etc. And the reason I did all that was so that, a 5-year-old, when he wakes up and decides to come in the living room and play and not interrupt our sleep, can press a button and have light. And at the same time, at like sunset, I can have it trigger a particular set of actions for the light that I would prefer when he's in bed and, I'm just enjoying watching TV. I don't mind paying a little bit extra for the bridge to allow those types of variations, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at. My use case is predominantly tied around scheduled automations with the occasional override. And if that's the use case, there's no reason to think of anything HomeKit compatible with or without a bridge as not fitting the bill. But if you're wanting to have a use case that is predominantly driven by voice commands, that's where I'm not so sure it holds up, unless you have HomePods in each room or something that seems to interpret Siri better than the fucking phone.
Yeah, voice command will not be the primary way that I manage them, but the brand that I've landed on is Cassetta by Lutron, and you brought up a really good point about how many switches the smart bridge can handle, and I did a quick look, and it's 75. It's 75 Cassetta device, or rather Lutron devices can be managed. So that to me is like one bridge more than enough. So that doesn't, that's a barrier knockdown. They're pretty expensive. Like a smart dimmer kit includes one single pole dimmer, a smart bridge, a remote for that light, which having the remote might be nice in some rooms, but not. I don't want to have a remote for all of them, and I think they're all going to come with a remote, and it's just like a cost I don't want to pay for. That's $100. That's not terrible, but I was able to. I put in 3 single pole switches for $40, and a dimmer for another like $25 or $30. I can't remember how much it was, and so the price is the Lutron ones are a lot more expensive. So I'll make a decision in the morning. One thing that is really nice about the Lutron, it has HomeKit support, which is good, but it also, there's a lot of, there are faceplates for they don't sell multi-gang switches, but they sell faceplates. So you can buy switches without any covering, and then buy like a faceplate for a 3-gang setup or a 2-gang setup. So that's really helpful. And the other thing that's helpful is they also have controls for ceiling fans. That would be great. So.
Yeah, I don't have any of my fans set up on HomeKit. I went the route of controlling at the bulb level for the most part with the hue deployment. And I honestly just don't touch my ceiling fan. Like twice a year I change the direction it rotates, and that's it. And it rotates at the same speed regardless of time of year or anything else, because that's what I find comfortable. And I've thought about, would I change it otherwise? And honestly, I wouldn't, but that's my use case. And what I've found is that where I really like the remote control for the fan actually is outside. There was a place that we went to. It was an Airbnb that had a ceiling fan that was remote controlled. That was great, and I actually took notes on what model it was and everything, and bought a similar fan. But I didn't buy it for inside. I bought it for our outside stoop because that's where I wanted the control over what it felt like. Because inside, I just leave fans on medium. The only thing I change is in the winter, I have it, direct airflow where it's kind of pushing it toward the ceiling and back down. And in the summer where it's just blowing directly down. Like, that's it. That's the only time I touch the fans.
The thought of the fan for me was like, I would love to put my fan on a schedule in the summer to turn on at 3 a.m. while I'm sleeping to cool the room further. I think right now I have like 3 or 4 a.m. Right now that it's winter, my thermostat drops, or my thermostat is adjusted at 3 a.m. so that it gets even cooler in the house, and then turns on, I think it's 7 to start heating up the house. So it's just a difference in the way we approach the piece of it. Yeah. I'm all about setting schedules so that I get a consistent experience, or a consistent. I'm setting. Like, I want to set some schedules for consistency. The scenes, like controlling scenes, would be sort of like, oh, cool, I can do that too.
Yeah, so the way I have our thermostat set at, I think it's 11, I have it go into night mode, which drops, I think, 4 degrees from the way I have it over the course of the day. A lot of this has become blurred over 2020 because there is no away setting anymore.
Right.
For all intents and purposes. But the way I have it set up is that, like, when occupied, it's a certain degree range. Once away, which typically would have started at 8 a.m., it's a little bit larger range that it will allow. And then I have it at 4 p.m. start to bring that back in for the temperatures that I want for while I'm at home. And then at 11 p.m. set it for sleep, quote unquote. And that's a wider range again, not quite as wide as when it would be away. The big problem is that we're never away. And so it's always at either sleep or occupied mode. And even then, I think I'd have to go back and look, but I think the way I have it set up is that for sleeping, it's 68 degrees, I think, overnight. And then at 6 a.m., it changes to 70 degrees to kind of, bring it up to a comfortable temperature to get out of bed. And then I think it's at 8 that I have it changed to away. And so there's like a 20-minute window that it actually thinks everybody is away before it registers motion and says, "Oh yeah, no, everybody's home." And yeah. But anyway,
no,
I don't do anything with the fans. I do it all through the AC itself.
Yeah, I have something similar going on, but I was just thinking it would be in the summertime. I'd take advantage of scheduling my fans to come on in the middle of the night just to keep cool the room further. So, or to just push cold air down.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is I want the constant airflow. I don't want it to be interrupted. I want the blankets off of me, and I want to feel the glorious push of air from the fan over me, because I get so ridiculously hot. It's uncanny, which makes even less sense given that I've been shaving my head for a year, because I seriously get hot overnight. And the only reason I'm even remotely comfortable anymore is because I don't have the mop of hair keeping me overheated. I am now comfortable overnight. Not hot, not cold. I am comfortable. Whereas previously, prior to shaving my head, I was overheated every single night.
That's bad. That'll wake you up.
It's funny. I'm going to claim it's high blood pressure.
I feel like that's a bit, I don't know. Anyway.
So scientifically, fact, it was high blood pressure. Now that I've been exercising, my blood pressure's under control. So it's all good now. Now I can actually get cold overnight, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I'm debating this. It looks, I don't know. I'd been looking at these Luton switches for a long time. Even before I'm seriously considering it. I've been looking at them because I was I was thinking when I do home automation, those are the ones I'm going to get. Turns out I went for something cheaper, or they're not cheap. They're good quality. The one I have, good quality product.
Less expensive. That's the phrase you're looking for.
No, it is. That's exactly the phrase I'm looking for. What I need to do before I change this is I need to go and look and see if anyone makes I just need to find a faceplate. If there's a $10 faceplate, then I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep the less expensive ones because it's going to solve my problem. And then my only problem is I don't know. I won't have any problems. These are not problems. These are just decisions I'm making. I don't mean to make light of things. Anyway, so if I can, I just need to look to see if anyone makes a panel. That's all I need is a panel because it's the size of a standard switch.
That I will say that's one of the nice things about the Insteon environment. When you run a local server, there are so many pieces of hardware. One of the things that was kind of nice is you could take an existing light switch and run it to a micro switch embedded in the wall where physically there was absolutely no difference in what you saw, but you had different wiring behind the plate to control behavior. It was nice to have that level of control, so I understand why some of that would be appealing, because I actually had a couple of those switches that would control exterior lights where I could flip on or off the light switch and it would control the light. But if I left it in a specific position, the automation would control the switch. That's a level of flexibility that is difficult to find in the officially sanctioned HomeKit style environment. For the most part, what you will find is a device is on or off, and it's where you put it in the chain that it's on or off, not a shared use case. The closest I have found, the iDevices switches that I use have a button on the side, so it's like a module that you plug into the wall and you plug whatever you're wanting to control into that module. The idea is that that module is always on, and what you're controlling through HomeKit is the relay within that module to provide power to whatever is plugged into it, right? So in this case, a lamp or a light. There's a button on the side of that particular module that you can override. So if you walk over and press it, it will turn on or off the device that's connected. That's the closest that I have found, but it's not quite the same as having a relay embedded into the wall that provides the same functionality, where the only thing you have to think about as the end user is whether you turn the switch on or off. There is a difference in mindset there. So I get it, but I don't know that you're going to find that level of control outside of really investing in a locally driven automation framework.
Yeah, and I'm not looking. That is not the, like, I don't have enough. Like, there's not enough. Like, I'm not looking to solve that problem.
Yeah, like what you're describing is easily accomplishable with any number of modules out there. It's just that what you're also describing is a level of seamlessness from a visual perspective that I don't think you're going to find as readily available as you would like. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like it's not so much that the functionality that you want isn't there. It's that you're going to see something that indicates that functionality. It's not going to just look like the native switches and wiring that you would expect in a non-smart home.
Right. Well, good news. I quickly did, I thought about, like, I hadn't looked for a 3-gang panel for the switches that I do have. I did a quick search, and there's one out there.
Of course there is.
I didn't even think to do that. I was like, it's got to come with, like, I have to buy 3 of them, and they have to come in the box, and they have to be there. And I'm just like, it's $7.19 on Amazon.
So I will say this is exactly why I chose to do most of my control at the final endpoint level. Because then it doesn't matter about the switches. Like in the living room, we've got 2 different switches that control power to the overhead lights and then one that controls power to the fan. I just make sure there's power to the overhead lights. They're always off unless my automation kicks them in. Like I just don't have to think about the switches. Well, and there's a certain level of comfort in that.
I was going to say there was a I'm already living in a house where there are 3 types of light switches in this house. No, 4. There were 4. There were the standard toggle switches. There is some Lutron switches that would fade up and fade down, and they're dimmer switches. And there's a toggle with a slider dimmer, and then a 3-way light switch. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 different types of light switches. So I'm actually, at this point there's now 5, but I'm actually reducing that number slowly.
Yeah, for as expensive as the Hue stuff is, it really is nice for the level of flexibility it provides. I say that, but everything I've heard about the Lutron stuff is pretty much on par. It seems like one of those things where you pick one and then you just go all in with that particular manufacturer.
That's my plan, and I'm gonna, now that I know that I could just buy the faceplate, I feel kind of dumb about it. Well, I got to talk it out, and I got to come to this conclusion this way. So, like, I feel better, and but my plan is to stick with these low cost ones because I don't plan to stay in this house forever. And If I did, I would go with a Lutron, but I don't. So I want to have this automation, but I don't want to pay the Lutron prices right now, because there are things about the Lutron lights that I do like. I do prefer. I actually like. A friend of ours, former coworker of ours, has them in his house. I've used them. They're nice. I like them. So I know that I like them, and I like the options that they provide. It's just that it's not worth it for this house.
Makes a lot of sense because, same kind of thing here. Like I do not intend to stay in this house too many more years. Like I'm already staying longer than I expected based on other developments. And part of that being they're building a hospital nearby, and so I know that jacks up property rates. And so, sure, I'd be stupid not to at least see kind of what that looks like over the next couple of years. But that's part of why the hue stuff made sense, is because I can just unscrew the bulbs and put like fluorescence or whatever, in their place, and nobody is the wiser.
You would be evil to put compact fluorescent. You'd be so evil to do that. I've got some if you want them.
I have a bin full. Like when I put all my LED lights in, I actually kept every single CFL.
Oh yeah.
And put it in a plastic bin so that when I sell, I'm going to put every single CFL back in.
100%. I've done the exact same thing. I have the CFL lights. They're going to go back in. Yeah.
Yep. I have no complaints with that.
If I will take all my LED lights too, even though they're just LED lights.
I might leave one or two of the non-smart LED lights that I've put in.
No, I'm taking my non-smart ones. We're at 2.5 hours. I know we had a thing. I crossed out the last two. They weren't important, but I thought I'm really glad we talked about home automation and HomeKit for these lights, which is it's helped me out tremendously.
I noticed the other two. Did you have anything like quick that you wanted to talk about specifically there, or do you want to save it?
I'm gonna save retro gaming. I'm just I can just there's not a lot to say about Daft Punk other than they broke up and they didn't say why, and I like their music.
Yeah, there was a meme that I saw that showed two Mandalorians talking about this is Daft Punk, and I
didn't make that connection.
Yeah, I laughed quite a bit, and that was it. That's all I have to say about it. I've never been a huge follower. I've enjoyed their stuff, but it is what it is.
A dozen years ago, I was thinking, I can't wait. I want to see them live, and they never. And I was living in New York, and I was like, if they're going to come to the U.S., that's a city they'll hit, and it just never happened. And for me to have seen them, it would have had to have been before 2009, and that just they weren't on my radar until about 2009. I mean, I'd heard them, knew of them. You couldn't get past Technologic when that came out. So, I like them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising. It's kind of strange and out of left field, but it's only because they're not really in the limelight other than for, artistic purposes. So it's just kind of unexpected, right?
Well, yeah. And there's not a lot that you know about them. There's very, they're very Banksy-like.
Yeah, so that's all I would have to say for sure.
That's really all I had to say about it as well. So,
all right, so we'll make retro gaming a topic in and of itself, because I think that lends to a discussion of the RetroPie gremlins that I had as well.
Oh, okay. I have a number of things I can talk about with retro gaming. So, I have moved it over into next week's show notes.
Right. And so that means that we get to continue the teaser for the Whiskey and Glasses episode for at least yet another week.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And probably another week. Just, being fair.
For funsies.
Yeah. Why not?
I know.
All right.
All right.
It's been a good conversation. I think that's more than enough to wrap up a show.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Stay frosty.
At least now it's nowhere near as relatable. You walk outside and it's 70 degrees.
It's so nice. It was so nice being outside today.
All right. Well, have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.